This is the first part about the original RDA. The first Anglo-American Cataloging Rules, AACR, were published in 1967. The second edition, AACR2, was published in 1978. The first big revision came in 1988, then the next in 1998. The last major revision was in 2002, and that was the last published revision that stuck around. Additional updates happened until 2005. AACR is still used by many cataloging agencies around the world. IFLA, the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, created the Statement of International Cataloging Principles, or ICP, but commonly known as the Paris Principles or Paris Statement. This statement was approved by the International Conference on Cataloging Principles in 1961. Its goal was to serve as the basis for international standardized cataloging. It has met that goal as, quote, most of the cataloging codes that were developed worldwide since that time have followed the principles strictly or at least to a high degree, unquote. The Paris Principles were initially focused entirely on entry points, what we now call access points, which are like doorways into a library catalog record. While we can now get there through general keyword searches, access points are more direct ways in, and they help us to know where we are going. On the other hand, IFLA also developed a more encompassing concept regarding how to think about a whole item and not just the intellectual creation aspects of its content. Focusing on the practical aspects of description and how to achieve a fair amount of consistency, IFLA developed FRBR, the Functional Requirements for Bibliographic Records. Later, IFLA expanded that concept to authority data, including the names for persons and titles, and then subjects. While RDA was initially developed to include subject considerations, it hadn't gotten there before the new RDA was conceived. These were the underlying basis for the development of RDA, trying to get it more in line with the future. Where AACR2 was a set of prescriptive rules about exactly how to write descriptions for every existing format in a uniform way, RDA is a set of suggestive guidelines about how to apply descriptive data elements to any existing or potential format in a consistent way. RDA began with the intent to create a third edition of AACR, which would of course be called AACR3. But with feedback from cataloging practitioners, the Joint Steering for Revision of AACR changed direction and changed the name. Then, in 2015, they changed the name again to the RDA Steering Committee. RDA was initially published in 2010. After an initial period of testing, it was officially implemented by the Library of Congress in 2013 to guide their cataloging practice. The foundational principles and models underlying the rules and guidelines we've used have changed over time. Those rules and guidelines have grown and changed as well. First, AACR2 was succeeded by RDA. AACR2 is available in print, which we all used while it was active. RDA is available through an online toolkit. That toolkit for the original RDA is used now. With the RDA Restructure and Redesign project, known as the 3R project, the content of RDA was restructured and the toolkit was redesigned. When it was all near completion, we had access to the toolkit in its beta form, and that form went live a month ago. To accompany AACR2, we relied on a set of interpretations of some of the rules made by the Library of Congress, known as the Library of Congress Rule Interpretation, or LCRI. The LCRI further standardized the application of AACR2 and were in separate documentation. Much of the wording from AACR2 was continued in RDA, and the Library of Congress continued its practice of interpreting the guidelines, this time partnering with others in the field, namely participants in the Program for Cooperative Cataloging. These rule interpretations were renamed to the Library of Congress and Program for Cooperative Cataloging Policy Statements, LCPCCPS, and were applied when RDA was adopted. It was the existence of these statements that made us all comfortable with following suit and adopting RDA. These policy statements were integrated directly with RDA in the Toolkit and can be viewed separately, but are also linked directly with the corresponding guidelines where the LCPCCPS green button is visible. When necessary to go further beyond, some specialized fields of cataloging created best practices for specialized scenarios. For example, the Music Library Association developed best practices for printed music and musical sound recordings. Those best practices were integrated in the Toolkit as well, also viewable separately, and are linked directly by the MLA button. The Online Audiovisual Catalogers Group, called OLAC, also has best practices for a variety of specialized formats. These are intended to be linked to the RDA Toolkit in the future. With the restructured RDA, those policy statements and best practices are being revised and redeveloped themselves. They're not done yet, and until they are, the new RDA will not be widely adopted. We are not sure yet how they will be integrated. Just like with any knowledge or skill, it takes time to learn, and in order to ensure that our users are able to find any resources they want or need, regardless of which library catalog they use, it takes time to reach a consensus for consistency and uniform application of the guidelines. The bottom line is that, even though the new RDA exists, it will still take time before it is widely used. This is a very quick and dirty view of the three standards that are the focus of our work now. As you can see, they are very different in structure. Though AACR 2 is no longer used in widely used in practice, it was the standard in use for a significant majority of records in WorldCat. There are over 500 million records in WorldCat, so that majority is a very large number. When you use a library catalog, you are very likely to see a catalog record that was created according to the AACR 2 rules. When you are looking for very old items in a library catalog, you are likely to see its predecessor. The newer the item, the more likely you are now to see a record created according to RDA, and once the new RDA is adopted, the number of records according to those guidelines will start to grow. But the majority of records that you will encounter for many years are created under AACR 2 or RDA. They're actually very similar, so it may not be noticeable at first, but as we go through this semester, you will start to recognize when you encounter an AACR 2 record instead of an RDA record. One of the most noticeable changes in the standard itself is the switch from chapters and the rules contained therein being focused on a single format. In AACR 2, you started with the format in hand, such as a book, a map, or a journal, and followed the rules for that format, which were all contained in one place. With RDA, you start from a broader perspective, applying the general guidelines to any format. That's where the policy statements came in, to give us instructions specific to applying any guideline to a specific situation that wasn't explicitly explained, such as for particular formats. Both AACR 2 and the original RDA have appendices to clarify situations such as capitalization and abbreviations. Abbreviations is another noticeable change between AACR 2 and RDA that you will see. A prime example of that is illustrations. As in AACR 2, that term was abbreviated to ILL period, and in RDA it is spelled out. RDA also has a glossary to clarify a variety of terminology used by the standard.